Okay, so the first one I got wrong was number 9. It's which of the following changes would most likely lead to a mammal population exceeding its carrying capacity? And I originally said C, which was an increase in the number of predators immediately after the offspring are born, because I was thinking that the predators would be able to eat the offspring that were just born, giving them like more food sources, which would increase like the predator population. But I learned that like after they ate all the offspring, their population, like the predator population, would end up decreasing because there would be no food sources left. Because they'd be able to like reproduce and their population would grow until all the offspring that they like were eating, that specific species, it'd be gone, since like they would eat it all, and then their population would decrease because they wouldn't have food anymore. So then I realized the correct answer is actually B, which was a decrease in the food supply immediately after offspring are born, because even though it starts off like bad, like there's not enough food for the offspring, the way ecological overshoots work is that like after there's a big crash, there's like an even bigger like increase. There's like a big increase after the crashes, and B has the biggest crash out of all the answers. So that would make the most sense, like according to that pattern, like the squiggly line pattern. And this knowledge would help me answer future questions, because for this particular question, you have to like think ahead instead of like in the present. And I was thinking like right now, like, yeah, C, it would like make the biggest population, but it wouldn't exceed their capacity. It would hit the carrying capacity and then decrease. Whereas like C, in the long run, it would exceed it because of like the overshoot. So like it makes me think like ahead, I guess, instead of like into like in the present, because sometimes you have to do that for questions. And then the next one I got wrong was number 10, which was talking about the effects of a limited fresh water supply on human populations. And I originally said C, the one like about like new sources for drinking water in the glaciers and snowpacks. And I said that because I knew that a limited fresh water supply would be bad for human populations. And A and B both like had like good outcomes. Like the first one was talking about like improved public health, and the second one was like an improved economy. But I knew that like in a limited supply would either like no matter what, it would be bad. And then D, I had no idea why it was talking about food. I was really confused because food was not in the question at all whatsoever. So I ended up at C, because it doesn't really say if the new supply sources would be good or bad. It like doesn't say if it would be beneficial. It just says that they would just happen. So I just thought that would be the best answer out of these particular ones. But then I like thought about it a little harder, and I learned that like the food comes from water, which I didn't think of at the time when I was reading this, because like a lot of food is like agriculture and crops, and in order to do that you need water to grow them. So then like D would make a lot of sense, like instead of it would, that's like the only one that's like actually bad because it's talking about famine. So yeah, I switched it to D, because then like that's a limited supply. You wouldn't have enough water to like do agricultural practices with, like harvest crops and stuff. So this knowledge would like help me answer future questions, because like it's not necessarily thinking outside the box, it's just like going in depth in every single answer, because when I first read this question, I thought that D was just completely out of the question. Like I think I read it once, and I was like, food, no food in this, like cross that out, get it out of here. So I wasn't focused on D, I was focused on the other 3. And while D was like the only one that had a negative effect, even though I knew that this would be a negative effect, I ignored it anyway. So it would help me in the future to, even if it seems like it'd be like an absurd answer, to look into it anyway and really think about all of the answers. And like if I know that something is going to be negative, like I should probably even look into it even more, especially if it's the only one that makes like sense in the long run. So yeah, just like reading every answer closely and thinking about them all. And then 13 I got wrong, and it was like, what's the ultimate source of energy for terrestrial ecosystem? And I originally said nutrients and vegetation because I didn't really understand the question, I think, when I read it, because I thought it was talking about like what would be the ultimate source of energy for like all the other like organisms. I kind of didn't really like pay attention to the terrestrial ecosystem part, because I think I saw the word terrestrial and then I saw vegetation and I just like plants, so I just like assumed that was the right one. And I was thinking like, oh well, the nutrients like come from the plants, so they go to everyone else. But I learned that is not what the question was asking at all. And it's actually asking like what would be the source for the plants themselves, like how do they get their source of energy? And that would be the sun, which is E. And that makes the most sense because the sun is like the ultimate source of energy for like all producers, and plants are producers, so that would make sense. And this knowledge would help me answer future questions because, like, again, it like makes me like think about like the question more and like reread it and understand it, instead of just like looking at one word and like assuming that the like answer that corresponds to that word, I guess, is correct. Because if I had read it like actually like read it more in depth and not ignored like the for terrestrial ecosystem part, it would have made a lot more sense, and I think I would have been able to do it. So I think in like the future I'll like pay more attention to the questions and what they're actually asking instead of like assuming what they're asking for. And then 16 I got wrong, and that was for a primary producer, like what is the main function of photosynthesis? And I originally said oxygen because, again, I didn't really pay attention to the for primary producer part. I thought that was just talking about like for everyone else, why would the primary producer do photosynthesis to make oxygen, is what I said. Because like we all breathe oxygen, and like that's like necessary for humans and like lots of other animals. But I didn't like actually like realize that it was talking about like for like why would the plants do photosynthesis. So I learned that is actually what they're asking, not like for everyone else, but for the plants themselves, like why do they need photosynthesis? And that would be to make glucose. That's C. And like they need glucose because that's how they get their energy. Like they get their energy from photosynthesis to make glucose to use as energy. And they would not use oxygen. I don't think they use it at all, actually, maybe a little bit, but like that they don't really need oxygen. They definitely need the glucose though. So again, like kind of the same as last time, like to answer future questions, like I need to pay more attention, because if I had like understood why it was saying for a primary producer, then I probably would have gotten this question right. But because I like didn't really understand, I picked oxygen because I thought it was for everyone else. So yeah, just like reading the question more closely. And then the last one I got wrong was actually like the food web. It was 18, it was B, which was identify a population of organisms that likely has the highest amount of energy available in the food web. And I originally said small fish because small fish had the most food options on here. It has 3 options for food. And I was just thinking that like because it had the most options, it had the most like availability, I guess, to energy, which doesn't really make sense now that like I actually like thought about it more. Because like I don't know, for example, if like zooplankton like died off, they'd still have like phytoplankton in the worms. But like that is not the right answer, because I learned that like the trophic levels and the 10% rule, like the producers always have the most amount of energy. So I'd say aquatic plants, but it could also be phytoplankton too, because they're both producers in this food web, because of the trophic levels and the 10% rule. Like the producers get all the energy, and they lose 10% when it goes to the next level, and then 10% goes when the next one, and like so on. So like as they get higher up, they lose energy, which is why like the top consumers, like in this one, like the bald eagle, would be eating a lot more food because it needs more energy, but it can't get it from like eating the same amount of food as everyone else, because there's not enough energy to sustain themselves. But the producers would have the most amount of energy because they get it from the sun, and that's where it all starts, down there. So the small fish would actually end up losing like a couple, because they're 2 levels up, but they would like end up losing energy. So the plants would have the most. So aquatic plants would be that answer. And then this would help me answer future questions, because it just like makes me think, like just like remember like vocab terms, even if like they don't seem like they'd be like applicable. Like the 10% rule, like I kind of thought about it when I was taking the test, but I just was thinking like, oh, like that many food, like that makes sense. But going back to like vocab terms, if you like apply them to certain questions, like you like figure out that the answer that you thought was right was wrong, because that's what I did here, because I wasn't thinking about the 10% rule and trophic levels. I was just looking at like the amount of energy available to them, not necessarily like who has it. So like in the future, like I'll think of like the vocab terms that I learned while learning about like first food webs, and like think of all the terms and like how I can apply those to it, and then like figure it out from there. So that's it.